was on the wrong side of a door that I could not open, no matter how hard I tried. And I was led to this basement room in the neighboring house for a very different reason than what I originally thought. And that was, there was this really cool toy in the corner. And it kind of looked like one of those build your own like roller coaster things that you could piece together. And I just remember looking at it and being like, oh my God, that's so cool. And it's weird that it's still dark in here, but that's pretty cool. And then something felt really off. And so I started to walk for the door. And I remember seeing the light under the door and reaching for the door handle. And I began to tug on it, but a hand stopped it. And it was much stronger than mine. And then I really knew something was wrong. And then I began to feel tugging on my pants and on my clothes, and I couldn't hold that either. And I started screaming, kind of one of those screams where you're afraid you'll never be heard. And then I just stopped and looked to the corner and thought, why can't I just play with a cool toy? I just wanted to play with the toy. And then everything kind of blacked out. And my next memory is of my mom sitting on her knees and looking into my face and shaking and crying and saying, please tell me what happened. Please tell me what happened to you. And I told her in the best way I could. Being a young kid and having that kind of vocabulary, you can't quite understand or describe what happened to you. So shortly after, my mom took me to see a therapist, which as a kid looks like playing with an awesome toy, well, more toys, doll houses. And the therapist comes back and says, you know, don't worry, there's no long-term trauma. She's going to be okay. But I have to report the abuser. And my mom got very panicked and said, please don't. Please don't report my nephew. But the therapist was legally obligated to do so, and so she did. And after that, life went on. And no one really talked about it. I should say no one talked about it, period. Christmases came with like a spoonful of avoidance and just kind of trying to not be in the same room, but obediently would take photos next to him and smile and pretend like things were okay, like everybody else. And I kind of just put this memory in a box and labeled it, maybe it could be a bad dream. Is it possible I could just keep it there? But I got into my teens, and the memory started bubbling up again, and I couldn't make it go away. And it was just about that time I needed to get some confirmation that it actually happened. And I don't know if it was a combination of like, I was just starting to understand my sexuality. I was 16 years old, say. I had a boyfriend at the time. And so I brought it up. And my mom confirmed it. And for whatever reason, I called my boyfriend shortly after and told him about the conversation that I had just had. And he called me a liar, which was shocking at first. And He said, "You told me that you've never done that sort of thing with a guy." Like I had a choice. How do you tell me? He wanted to know every detail, which was very difficult to describe. And when I got to the point of blackout, he was very, very adamant about wondering whether or not I'd actually been raped. And at the time, I was like, I don't really know. And that was an even bigger freak out. And after that, I didn't talk about it again. And life went on again. But I had noticed that somebody very important to the story wasn't showing up, which was my dad. And by the time I had reached my mid-20s or so, enough was enough as far as going to these family Christmases and holidays and pretending that things were okay. And so I sat my dad down on our back porch and said, I'm done going to these family gatherings. That thing that happened when I was young, I don't know if you know, this really affects me. And he said, what am I supposed to tell everybody? Why are you not there? I don't know. You can tell them whatever you want. I'm just not coming. And to be truthful, that was a huge relief. It felt like I had brought it up, but the conversation wasn't over. And it wasn't until about a year ago that my dad and I, and coming up to this point, I becoming a little more myself, and letting my dad see that. And we kind of have a fundamental difference in beliefs, and that's always been an issue as well. But underneath that has been this whole idea of this never really feeling like he had my back. And in fact, putting me in situations where it was more likely to happen again. One summer, he hired my cousin to mow our lawn. And I love to be outside. But those days, those were inside days. So the conversation didn't feel over, and it still probably isn't over. But one particular evening, I was sharing a piece of myself with him and things that I was excited about, and it kind of snowballed into, okay, why are you hanging on to this? Can you just let this go? Why can't you just be part of this family? And I tried to explain the best way I could without being like, isn't it obvious? But he started to get really angry with me. And he said, do you honestly think he would do that to you now? I'm like, do you even know how old he was when that happened? And don't you think I would have stopped it had I seen it? And it was devastating, obviously, to hear that from a parent. But it was what I needed to hear, to really understand there was only one person I needed to acknowledge this story, which was me. And so the people in my life who were closest to me and my family members in one way or another told me to forget. And I can't forget. And I won't forget. And here I am, acknowledging it to myself and to you guys, many of whom are friends, dear friends, and to the world, that this happened and it impacted me. And I need to do this to actually move forward. Because I've got some pretty cool shit to do. Thank you guys.